This morning, a British court ruled that the HM Revenue and Customs unlawfully concealed information into the status of an investigation into the export of surveillance technology to repressive regimes. We spoke with Ala'a Shehabi, a British-Bahraini human rights activist who was targeted by Spyware FinFisher distributed by a British company Gamma International.
Today's verdict was a damning one. The judge basically ruled that HMRC's actions were unlawful, and the judge also said that HMRC should decide and let us know whether it is intending to prosecute Gamma International for illegally supplying the Bahraini government with intrusive spyware. So for me, it's only the beginning of the path to justice. For all of us who have been victims of surveillance, who've had our privacy invaded, this is just the beginning of a process in which we begin to hold these companies and governments that allow such exports to take place and holding them basically to account. And so I think today's verdict is important in that process. And I think that the UK government in general should be held responsible for any form of dual-use exports that are knowingly sent to governments who will then use them to violently repress human rights and to target activists who are simply calling for democracy. More importantly, it highlights the case of the danger of digital surveillance and the massive global industry in digital surveillance. So again, this is a very positive outcome in that it will endorse and continue to validate the work of NGOs like Privacy International, like Bahrain Watch, who have been investigating the proliferation and the massive expansion of this global industry in digital surveillance. Well, I think like any normal user of the internet, we're used to receiving junk emails, spam, spyware, receiving pop-up windows and so on. But the kind of stuff that I started receiving in 2012 were particularly suspicious. They were dressed up to be emails that would be of interest to me. They were dressed up to look like emails from other activists, from political leaders, from journalists, based around information that I would be interested in, and to entice me, to really try and entice me to open these attachments. But my suspicions were raised immediately. And I immediately sent these to digital security experts that I knew of. And we then began an investigation with Bloomberg that then uncovered this to be the first specimen of spyware that was manufactured by Gamma International. So they even found the signature of the company that supplied this. And that was the real shock, that even though I knew the Bahraini government would be targeting me, because of my, involvement in the pro-democracy movement, I was very surprised that this was a British company that was supplying this, and that was when the international attention came to bear on this issue. In terms of the harm gained, I was in a very vulnerable situation at the time. We were in Bahrain. We were working with journalists on the ground. We were documenting human rights violations. We were going to monitor protests. We were from little things like taking protesters to hospitals for treatment. And so knowing you were being closely monitored and under surveillance really makes your life a lot harder. It exposes you to these repressive governments who have absolutely no hesitation in harassing you in all forms, whether it's a travel ban, whether it's arresting your family members, whether it's you being arrested, that you are enabling them through the spyware to do that and to make you an easy target. And so there is definitely the element of psychological, the feeling of psychological vulnerability. But then going through a process of accepting different ways of trying to handle that kind of pressure, and knowing basically that this simple thing, which is a telephone, is actually a gadget that is being used to track your every step and to monitor your every phone call and to record everything that you type. So again, it's limited my use of the internet to the extent that I know I'm being watched. And so, you know, this is after the NSA scandal. We know that's happening worldwide. So I'm not the only one. And but in this case, it was people that were directly profiting from selling this equipment to governments like Bahrain. That was the most that made it particularly distasteful and particularly harmful, because there are just no limits to in the extent they will go to try and suppress your activities. The steps that we've taken to challenge the basic criminal activity of supplying software that's been completely violated has been the most difficult, in the sense that this should be a black and white case. Gamma, by the government's own communications, is violating export laws. Has the government taken any steps or actions to stop Gamma from supplying the Bahraini regime with spyware? The answer that we believe is to be no, because we haven't been provided with the information that can clarify that.